Everyone's talking about AI, but who's actually implementing it? I'm Jenna Ahern, the CEO of Guardian Owl Digital, a search engine marketing firm rooted in integrity and transparency in the digital age. AI and marketing are at a crossroads, and the technology is moving faster than most business leaders can keep up with. That's why we created Go AI, a podcast series where we interview leaders in various industries about all things artificial intelligence. With each guest, my co-host Connor Rafferty and I will explore the applications that this rapidly evolving technology has for business leaders and their industries. Let's go AI. I'm thrilled to introduce our next guest, Nick Karels. Nick is a two-time IBM Master Innovator, the former Chief Innovation Officer of Good Maps here in Louisville, Kentucky, and among other things. So, Nick, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and who you are.
I'm really excited to be here and talking about this AI future that we're going to have. Yeah, it's just my past. I've always been tinkering and endeavoring in many different things from my days early on in military aviation, working on technology there, and always had a background and an inkling for technology things my entire life. And it just naturally dovetailed into my career. Moving eventually from engineering into consulting into the business world, being an entrepreneur and kind of dabbling in things, looking at building a micro business, being a consultant, successful consultant at IBM for 15 years. And that was a really interesting time in life. There were a lot of flux going on, especially around natural language processing and AI models. They were just coming on the scene really big around 2011 all the way up until today. But I think there's still a lot to be done there. And I'm excited to talk about that.
So when you hear the phrase artificial intelligence, especially with your background, what comes to mind?
Oh, well, that's always a loaded statement, I think, because I don't look at artificial intelligence the same way as a lot of other people. I look at it as maybe it's more augmented ignorance or artificial infallibility. But I understand where we go with the artificial intelligence thing, because that's the general marketing mantra that's been out there. But when I look at it from an augmented ignorance perspective, I think about how it's being designed, how it's being used and consumed by the end users. So there's this ability of programmers to design AIs. You tend to get the ethical bounding and the morality of the programmers inadvertently put into that AI engine as they're designing it.
Sure.
So there needs to be oversight in that particular case. And if there isn't, there's ignorance in that particular model. There's also the perception that it's intelligent. So when we say artificial intelligence, everybody assumes, hey, our responses are going to be intelligent. They're going to be thought out. They're planned. Yeah, it's infallible. And that's just not the case right now, as we've all seen many times. And Google had to pull their responses because it was creating historically inaccurate responses. So they recognized that. And that shows that they have a commitment to providing accuracy, which is good. And then the end user, consumer of AI, they put a lot of trust in that AI model. So I think having the ability to understand the ethos of how the AI was developed, because you have companies that might develop the AI around their own corporate ethos. And that's a huge issue because we don't know exactly what some of those companies want to get out of the AI, because those could be very private areas of development. And the other part of that is the artificial intelligence itself, its ability to generate responses based on the models that it's trained on. And if somebody doesn't understand what it's trained on, they might ask questions outside the realm of the model's expertise, and it might generate false or misleading information trying to fill the gaps, because essentially right now these models are transformers. They're taking a lot of information, transforming it in a way that makes sense and is intelligent.
Hallucinate a little bit.
A little bit.
So you talk about a familiarity with natural language processing as early as 2011, but when did you first hear of artificial intelligence and what were your impressions of it?
I was always interested in what would it mean if computers became intelligent and able to do things in the world. And when I was at IBM, I had the opportunity to see the Ken Jennings versus the Watson episode. And it was like time stopped at IBM when that happened. We were like, oh my goodness, look at the outcome that we have here. This model is very specific. It's trained on a very precise data set to operate within those parameters of a Jeopardy show. But that proved the evolutionary capability of the large language processing models that we have, the LLMs, that would eventually become what people think are AI today, which are essentially just large machine learning models. But I also think the evolution of that is going to continue. So we're building all these machine learning models that are all being developed in very specific ways. And I think when they all get connected together, that's when we're going to see a huge transformation in AI.
In that same vein, what questions right now would you want answered from AI?
where does it stop?
Yeah.
There's so much development happening in so many different areas in so many different ways. There's issues with the moral compass of AI. How do we encode for that? How do we handle scenarios where AI has never been experienced with it before? From a military perspective, how do we handle the operations on a battlefield where the ultimate end goal is the taking of a life? And is there going to be a human in the loop with that always? And I'm not sure I want an AI making an autonomous decision based on a glitch. One thing I always tell people is that AI or any even machine learning models can evaluate 1 million decisions before a human being even knows a decision is needed.
Wow.
So in terms of the future, there will obviously be a ton of applications for AI, but there already are right now. So in terms of your own business ventures, what are your current implementations of AI right now?
Yeah, so I've experienced quite a bit with the GPT platform. And when that was released more publicly in 2023, when I was at Good Maps, we were experimenting with that quite a bit. I saw the ability for it to significantly accelerate things that you're doing, as long as you understood the context of the responses that you're getting. Someone like me, an experienced consultant, many years doing things like this for large corporations, I understand when I'm not getting the responses that I need, so I have to tweak the prompt engineering behind it or get teams of people looking at why this particular model is doing things in a certain way.
Like asking a different question?
Yeah, asking a different question or framing the boundaries, or even we did some training stuff. So we could look at training data and say, did the data that we put in make sense for the outcome we're trying to get here? Like if you trained a whole bunch of doors and you mislabeled them as windows because they've got window panes in the doors, how does an AI recognize the difference of that? And that's a very nuanced thing. And then somebody data labeling that might actually write it as a door, and another person might write it as a window because they might just be thinking of it as a window because it doesn't quite look right.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
So how do you think AI is a differentiator then for small and micro businesses?
Yeah, so I think it's a force multiplier. And I look at it as like a partner. So one thing that has always scared me about AI is its ability to augment what you currently do, but also it has an ability to fill gaps in spaces where you're not an expert. And that could be a blessing and a curse, because if you understand what you don't know, but the AI is coaching you through what you don't know if it's right or wrong. You're just going to probably rely on it and do what it says.
Trusting it blindly.
Yeah. And so that can get you into trouble. But I think from a perspective, like when I worked with my STEM Wings microbusiness company, I was like, you know what? I'm not exactly a graphic designer, but I know I can use AI to get some prompts out there to see what a logo would look like for my company. And so I wanted something with a circuit pattern on wings because I do a lot of drone product stuff. So I thought, hey, you know what? Let's try to get something cool out of that. And I generated the couple of prompts for DALL-E 2 to get in there and provide some responses. And I liked a couple of the things that I saw, but I didn't want to use those because, first of all, you can't copyright something that comes out of an AI. But I said, hey, that can actually prompt myself to say, I like that. That prompted me to change the design. And I actually went with a graphic designer and I said, I want it to look similar to this, but I'm going to change it and I'm going to make it this way.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Gave you like a tool for a first draft for a logo design.
Yeah.
So shameless plug here. What use STEM Wings? Tell the audience a little bit about this. This is incredible.
Yeah. So that's a company I dabbled in, founded in 2020 during the pandemic when I hadn't been programming in C+ in forever. And with all the microcontrollers that are out and the ability for all the MEMS electronics, which are, everything's gotten smaller and you could put code on a lot smaller devices now. I said, hey, I need to learn C+ again and just fiddle around with this stuff. It's a cool hobby. So I did something, I build and fly model aircraft. I've been doing it for 30 something years. And I'm talking about giant scale, realistic, real models that fly aerodynamically exactly the same as the full scale models. And one of my favorite jets is the F-22 Raptor. So I have a 5-foot wingspan Raptor that I fly around, but making them more realistic is something that people strive for. And I took a shot at doing that. I built an informatic display. That's a data logging display using an Arduino and a couple displays and some of my graphic design skills. And I just put it out there on one of the internet forums saying, hey, look at this cool thing. And somebody's like, where'd you buy that? And I was like, oh, that's a good question.
I built it.
Yeah, maybe I should make a business around that. And I put it out there on a social media campaign, just a small one. And I got 50 sales right away. And I was like, oh, I don't have time to handle this. So
yeah,
I had to back it down and just meter it out slow. And I kept it on simmer when I was at Good Maps because that was just a very high demanding position. And I had multiple roles there in executive positions. So I kept that on the back burner. I maybe fulfilled 2 or 3 orders a month. But now that I have some time on my hands, I was like, hey, let's experiment with a micro business. And can I use AI to grow this micro business into something more substantial and maybe even something that I could do full time eventually?
Yeah, and sorry for those that are just on audio that can't see this visually, but go look at the video and you'll see what Nick's referencing. So what impact, if any, do you see this technology playing in the digital media and creator space?
Yeah, I think it's going to be hugely disruptive. And there's just a couple things, just full disclosure. I've actually written a book on Amazon. It's called The Final Event. And It's about an asteroid redirect initiative. When NASA actually had come out with that, talked to a NASA engineer about, hey, is this a viable approach for redirecting an asteroid? It turns out they were doing something similar, just not exactly the way I did it in my book, because it was about a plot and villains and things like that. But the cool premise behind that is this was something that I thought of and created, and it's only like 55 pages long. I could take AI and I can expand on that, and I could create a whole genre around that. I might not have time to do that myself, but creators everywhere can do things like that now. And I've seen GPTs generating full-length novels with some of the API programming that's been done around them. I think there's a huge future for that. But what's really interesting right now is the whole Sora kick from OpenAI. And that is just going to be a game changer for folks who have really cool ideas about video production and they just want to create a scene and start stitching them together to short stories. And we're going to see an evolution in that space like we've never seen before.
Yeah, people say, oh, what will happen to Hollywood with that type of technology? But I'm interested in thinking like, what doors will that open for people who normally couldn't produce that type of video on their own?
I think you're right there, because if you don't have the skills in creating the dynamic scenes, but you have a conceptual understanding, it's just like somebody who's an architect but can't build a house.
Yep.
They can describe what that house needs to look like and they can design all the parameters, but somebody still has to go do it. And that AI engine is going to be doing that. So they can go in there, change the lighting of a scene without having to get lighting professionals in there to do it. And they could just experiment with all these different angles. And then you can start eventually putting characters in the scene with dialogue, and you can change the dialogue on that. I'm sure we're going to get to that point.
Oh, yeah. I guess it'll be dependent on how good the video that the AI had to train on, which seems like there's a lot of copyright questions in terms of what they can actually train it on.
Yeah, a lot of controversy in that space right now, for sure.
Speaking of training data, one of the things that is really important to know about AI for our audience is that the quality of data that goes in is the quality of data. It's the quality of outputs that come out when it comes to AI. So if you have bad quality data, bad quality outputs, as a consultant, what do you want your clients to know about preparing their data for AI?
For one, making sure your data is clean and just annotated, labeled. You usually will have to have a data scientist go in there and analyze what you're doing with your data, how your data is sprawled. Like, let's say you're a smaller organization, you haven't really had a lot of reins on your data. You're not using structured tables. You're just Excel spreadsheets here and there. You've got Word documents all over the place. You need to bring that all together. So you could either have an effort to put that into a structured data format, or you can have it ingested into some AI engines as just basically as it is. So free-form formats, there are some abilities of these engines to parse through things like that and provide some kind of structured content around some relational database inputs and things like that. But you really want to have clean data. You want to have data oversight, data governance, and those things in place. So you're looking through, how have we gotten ourselves into this particular case? I know there's a company in town who's going through a data transformation initiative right now to prepare for AI. Their data is basically written down on old recipe sheets, so they need to put those into systems so that they can be fed into these AIs. Now, eventually we'll get to a point with Capture or OCR and where you can just start scanning pages and it's going to automatically format that stuff for you. But we're talking maybe 10 years in the future. Yeah.
Okay. And I think a lot of businesses, unfortunately, can relate to that. You're talking about those recipes and here I have it written down. I need to now take this and digitize it, if you will. So as a business owner, leader, or consultant, what task would you recommend or consult businesses to start delegating or think about delegating?
Yeah, having AI as a partner is interesting, but there should be oversight of that. Some larger companies can create a department. Smaller firms can hire somebody in as a consultant to say, hey, I've got an idea that I want to use AI for, but I don't know how to implement it. And you just hire a coach to walk you through that process and to have oversight of, what do I need? Steps to clean your data. Do I need a data scientist? Do I just need a guru that can come in there and handle it for me? It's a lot of it's related to the size of the company and the ultimate goal that you have. So if you have a goal of, I want to create a chat bot based on all of my responses that I've had for years on my support ecosystem. You probably have some decent data around the responses that you've had. You've got FAQs, you've got blogs and things like that people have generated. So that's a pretty decent starting point to start training an AI on. And a lot of chatbots are pretty well developed. So you can throw some information in there that may not be as well structured as some of the newer frontiers of the AIs that we've been looking at.
So a lot of great applications for AI, but it's also a lot of fear surrounding AI. Some of it's founded, some of it's unfounded.
Doom and gloom.
Yeah, doom and gloom. But what for you about artificial intelligence do you find concerning?
Yeah, its ability to garner human trust in a way that it really shouldn't right now. And it's less about the AI itself and more about humanity's response to what we have perceived as AI. It's creating dangerous precedents of over-reliance. And I think over-reliance on AI right now, and I've experienced this with some past customers, clients, and they just rely on what's coming out of it. I think there's just too much opportunity for the interplay to be incorrect between the AI that's driving the results that you're seeing and the people who are expecting the results.
And making decisions.
Yeah, if you're relying on AI that's been biased inadvertently and you're making a decision based on that, your decision's inherently biased.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you control for that? And I know some people working with some companies that are trying to figure out this problem and trying to make sure that we have traceability and transparency in AI so we know the development process, what data it's trained on, and how it came to its actual result. A human can tell you the thought process behind why they came to a decision, but right now an AI can't.
Sure. In your industry experience as a consultant, what would you identify as some of those common sense areas or roles that you feel like we're always going to have human oversight for?
For one, healthcare.
Healthcare.
Yeah, if there's a decision being made by AI on a healthcare situation, there's always going to be a human oversight to just verify that and say, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Or wait, this is wildly inaccurate. Like a brain cancer is not in the lungs or something wildly, it's not usually that wildly inaccurate, but that's just a good example. I think there's also just keeping human in the loop as much as possible for any ethical or morality-based type decisions is something I think we're going to have to keep a handle on. AI doesn't know. It's not contextually aware of why you're asking things. And it might not know that you're asking it to do something malicious. And that's also a concern. So we need the human in the loop.
Yeah, it's not so much that it's immoral, so much as it just is incapable of having morality at all. Just as it's incapable of having emotions or common sense, which is the somewhat concerning thing about it. A lot of it, what it will do just depends on who has it.
Yeah, and who's developing the morality engine AI that's going to put checks and balances in on all the factual AIs that are out there generating factual content and to say that this is something that's not accurate, so you need to go back and redo it. And I think we're going to have essentially that AI composer at some point as we evolve towards a general AI.
Well, and it's concerning. There's not that many people working on the ethics of developing that out for AI. There's a lot of people working on off-the-shelf tools and machine learning and developing this technology, but not on the ethics side. Do you know a company that's doing good work out there that you've came across?
I actually do. One of my good friends, Beth Rudden, out at Bast AI, she's out of Boulder, Colorado, and she was definitely one of the leading experts in that space and has spoken in a number of conferences on that. Shout out to Beth. Yeah, that's the work that she's doing in that space is really leading the industry and as far as how ethical AI is developed and how you track the linearity of AI decisions through the development to the execution lifecycle.
We've been talking about generative AI and just the potential for it to be misused in terms of creating deceptive content. I think the watermarking of that can probably help to some degree, as well as putting guardrails about not using an actual human being. It needs to be like an amalgamation if you're going to have a human in the AI-generated video. What are your thoughts about the potential morality of the creative AI?
On the morality side, there's one thing, but I think having the watermarks and the digital lineage on the AI creation content is key. And Adobe had really come out with a genius method of doing that. And I think we could also use blockchain technology to just make sure that we have a good linear watermark track record of the development of that content. And even that goes into part of how these companies need to track and tailor that content as they're training to annotate labels of, hey, this data was trained in this way. And when this AI provides this response, we have this watermark of the linear data that it was trained on so that we know that it came from that particular section of data. And we can go back and troubleshoot why it made that decision if it didn't align with the moral compass of the outcome. So I think there's just so much open field in that space right now because a lot of times the programmers are the ones we're relying on to get together, and there's rooms and teams of engineers and people working on the complex math behind making a decision that ultimately may be moral or maybe not moral. They don't know that. They just know that these are the inputs and this is the output. Somebody else has to decide if that output is correct in that particular scenario. And I definitely would like to see more of that.
And when we speak of inputs and outputs, we're mostly talking about just inputs being the data that it's given or just received in terms of, say, like the prompt for ChatGPT, the output being what ChatGPT gives you to the end user.
Yeah, more on the training set data. So the things that the AIs are taking in to learn how they need to respond. And then also on the other side, there is the prompt engineering. Like you've seen a lot of very creative prompt bypassing where people are inputting things into these prompt engines and getting a result that the AI was basically constrained against giving. And they're like, let's get creative and figure out how we can bypass that again. So you have this constant ebb and flow of engineers versus malicious users trying to circumvent the things. And in one way, that's helping develop that technology in a way where it can be more robust against that. On the other hand, there's always going to be people trying to circumvent those systems and try to do something for their own purposes, like hackers, especially. Like when we start getting into the AI realm of hacking, and the even scarier part is identity hacking, where we got people in their AIs simulating your voice, calling up your parents, asking for money. And those are scary dystopian type scenarios. They won't always happen, but we'll eventually have AIs that will fight AIs in that particular space and prevent that from happening. So it's going to be an interesting world to live in the next 10 years.
Well, speaking of an interesting world, what do you feel like an ideal future would look like with AI?
Ideally, I think humans would just be able to have more leisure time. The AIs would be doing the things that we don't want to do, but we'd have oversight. But realistically, I think there's going to be a lot of autonomy in the spaces where we have right now autonomous vehicles. And when they're more AI driven, you'll be able to go places without having red lights. You'll just be able to have these continuous intersections. And that's scary in a way where you've got cars just zipping along at 100 miles an hour, catching the empty space between two cars in an intersection. And any one thing goes wrong there, you might have a collision. But an autonomous system can create efficiency like that, whereas a human system cannot.
Yeah, we were talking about earlier, just not even needing driveways where you can just call a vehicle and it just shows up, right? And yeah, the efficiencies are going to be remarkable.
Yeah. And I think the ability to have microtransportation evolve even more based on that, the network that we have, and I'm very much in drones, obviously, but I've always looked at things like the defunct malls that we have seen propagate across the country, or kind of revamp those into transportation hubs where you've got AI-driven drones going between mall ports, and you just get off the roof, you go down to your restaurant, your movie theater, whatever, you jump into your autopilot rental car that's on the electric charging port in the parking lot, and you can zip off to your next place and it takes you back and you fly back home.
Oh my God.
And yeah, you don't need to plan anything. It's all planned for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just a wild vision of the future.
Yeah. I'm sure some people are terrified of hearing that, but that to me seems pretty cool.
To bring it back a little more into a business context, are there any emerging AI technologies that you're excited for in terms of how it will impact the business world?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. I think the advent, I wouldn't say emerging, but looking more future facing, something that combines the best elements of multiple AIs together as an AI engine itself. So let's say I want to create a video segment to promote a product. And I've developed a product, I've got it out there, but maybe I'm not as good at prompt engineering for something graphically as I am for text. And I can sit down and explain to an AI what I want to have happen. I want to have a video of this particular thing taken, and I'm trying to reach this particular market. What social media channels do I need to go across? How can I automate that entire process? And it would be my coach and guide me through that. As you start connecting AIs together and having this orchestrator, the conductor.
I was going to say conductor.
Yeah, you'll start seeing things like that happen more. And you see this now with GPT, where GPT and DALL-E 2 are interconnected. You can talk to GPT and have it use DALL-E 2 to generate an image for you. Whereas before you were like just strictly using that. And in DALL-E, and I'm like, I need a image of a wall with a light shining from the top right at 45 degrees, and you do all that. And now you're like, tell ChatGPT, I just want a room with soft ambient lighting and white walls, and I want to check out how my house looks with different colors or something like that.
It's so neat. So a lot of leaders are talking about jobs maybe not even being replaced, but reallocating those resources. Like you described, us being able to give AI the task that we don't want to do. What industries do you feel like are going to be most affected with AI?
I think consulting is ripe for huge disruption because a lot of the big four consulting firms out there have years of deep consulting data they can train all these AIs on and basically say, hey, you want an AI consulting partner? It's $19.95 a month here. So subscribe to our service. It'll be constantly available for you anytime you need it. And it will answer a whole bunch of deep questions you have about how to develop your business. On the other hand, instead of looking at it that way, you could say, now my company can have a partner that works with these firms and actually curates that AI content for me. So it will create a new position while eliminating maybe several other. But in the meantime, we're a little ways out from that, fortunately, but there's a lot of data curation jobs that need to happen in order to get to that point. But some of the big firms are already light years ahead in that particular space.
And I'm aware that at Good Maps, the technology there was related to indoor navigation. And so data curation there would involve getting the layout of a room. In terms of data curation for AI, what do you think are the biggest challenges there and obstacles to overcome?
Yeah, there's familiarity with the data. I think you always have to find somebody who's familiar with the data sets you're trying to train the AIs on. And so when you have just a generic data set and you go in there might be somebody who might be skilled in maybe one or two areas of that data set. And they could try to make inferences because they're a human on what they need to label or is that label correct. A lot of larger companies that I've been with, they will bounce that data set around between a number of data scientists, and some of them have expertise in different areas. So you're able to cover that wider range. Smaller companies, they need to partner with folks who understand that and have a network of folks that they can have to help annotate that data, train and label it so that it's actually providing the right results. So I think that's a huge thing to think about there.
So is there anything else business owners should be thinking about right now? If you had to give us some action items or takeaways, what would those be?
Yeah, first thing is definitely familiarize yourself with the large language model AIs that are out there. GPT is leading the market. Google Bard is there. There's Copilot from Microsoft, and those are the big ones. There's a lot of other companies out there that have smaller ones. I don't know all their names, but they're doing things in that space. But some of them are actually using the technology from GPT, and they've written APIs and they've just wrapped it around there. So they're curating their own content and providing the bumpers like in a bowling lane where you keep it in your lane. But familiarizing yourself with that, getting used to writing queries and understanding if the outputs are matching what your intent is, and seeing if you can identify folks in your company that are interested in AI in general and just start getting them involved in that. But I think it's also looking at your business holistically and saying, where can I benefit from AI? If you're a really small business, you might not be good at accounting, and everybody hates accounting. Maybe accountants love accounting, but
How can I outsource this?
Exactly. And so you have accountants for that, right? But now you might not know all the right questions to ask them about some of the deeper things they're doing, but you have a AI partner and you can just ask them just like a consultant. Say, hey, I've noticed this particular thing in my line item, and how is that affecting my balance sheet in this particular way? And it will go through and tell you that. So becoming more familiar with the nuances of the things that you're looking for and the outputs that you're expecting, but also understanding, and I think the key part of this is understanding that the large language models that are out there right now can't solve everything for you. They're trained on large data sets. There are specialized AIs out there that are specifically math and finance oriented and things like that. So go hunt those down and find those, become familiar with them. And if you're not, you can call up companies like Guardian Owl and have somebody come out and coach you through the product process. Yeah.
I love it. Words of wisdom for business owners, other than the task, like what would you leave them with?
Yeah, words of wisdom. Don't implicitly trust the output from AI. Right now, it's still in such an infancy stage. And fortunately for the expansion of AI, you had companies like OpenAI really hit the market hard with a product that was actually very useful.
Consumer facing.
Yeah. And it was accurate in a lot of ways. And they're developing things very quickly. And that technology changes so fast. They'll literally release things when they need to release them. And sometimes they're better and sometimes they're not. And they'll pull it back if it's not and change it. but just understanding that those things are constantly evolving. You can't always trust everything that you're seeing. So have an expert kind of review it until you can trust it. And yeah, trust but verify is the old adage.
Of course. Nick, this has been an absolute pleasure. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they find you?
They can get me through nicholaskarels.com.
Okay.
I've got my own little website there.
Thank you so much. I learned a lot. This has been very enlightening.
Well, thank you, Jenna. And I really appreciate the time here.
Thank you for listening to Go AI. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and review our podcast so we can continue to grow and offer more great AI content. If you're looking for digital marketing, digital transformation, or AI help, make sure you visit www.guardianowdigital.com. Have questions? Email team@guardianowdigital.com for answers. See you next time on Go AI.